Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Business Day Women Economic Empowerment Digital Dialogue. And thank you so much to our partners, Accenture, SEDA, and the IDC. It would not be possible to have this kind of conversation that we're going to have over the next hour without your participation. So today we actually gather around looking at paving the way for women-owned SMEs. And just to set the scene here a little bit, according to the World Bank, Africa is the only region in the world where more women than men choose to become entrepreneurs. Yet when we bring it down to the southern tip to South Africa, where women make up more than half the population, female-owned businesses are seeing profits nearly 40% lower than those businesses owned by men. So we're seeing a gender pay gap there, especially in play, but we're also seeing it when we look at female participation in that entrepreneurship space. And I guess what we're going to be talking about, and we're going to be outlining quite in-depthly here, at least over the next hour, are the factors that are holding women back, how they can overcome some of the obstacles, the strategies we need to be putting in place in the entrepreneurship ecosystem. We'll also be looking at how corporates in South Africa can provide the support needed for women-owned SMEs to be able to thrive and be sustainable. So if there are any questions that you do have over the next hour, any points you want to raise, you're more than welcome to put it into the live chat facility, and we will get to those questions that you have a little bit later on. So I'm not alone this morning in having this conversation. I just want to introduce you to my panel of experts, starting off with Ndogozo Majola, who is an executive manager for Enterprise Development Division at SEDA. She is joined by Zandile Njamela Mamboni, who's a supplier inclusion and diversity lead at Accenture SA. And of course, we have Lucretia Kumalo, the divisional executive for client support and growth at the IDC. Now, ladies, all of you have fantastic, extensive experience, especially when it comes to working with SMEs and understanding the lay of the land on the ground. And if possible, let's start off with you, Lucretia, by looking at some of the obstacles, the challenges, what's really happening on the ground for some people who may not necessarily be having that in contact approach with entrepreneurs, especially female-owned SMEs. Perhaps you can set the scene for us.
Good morning, everybody, and good morning, Nastasia. I think really, and I think you put it very well when you introduced this topic, women do remain as an underserved group of entrepreneurs in our country, particularly in South Africa, where we're still quite low. I mean, we account for only 20% of businesses in South Africa are owned by women, and that is low compared to other countries. For example, in Botswana, about 38% of businesses are owned by women. So it's a very important area of focus that we really need to put our eyes on. At the IDC, since 2015-2016, we started really focusing and honing in on supporting women. What we do find is that women generally, and I'm really, really generalizing, they sometimes don't know which capital is available to them. So access to capital is usually a big hindrance for a lot of businesses. They tend to start the businesses, and those businesses don't grow to be significant players in the different parts of the economy. And that's also sometimes an issue of access to markets and spending significant time with different players in those markets. Sometimes they don't have enough opportunities. Sometimes it's also because of their responsibilities at home. So they don't have enough opportunities or even enough information. And sometimes it's really about technical skills as well as financial skills. So it's a number of different reasons that are impacting on women. And so as the IDC, and I think also some of my colleagues at SEDA, we try to provide that support, which we call non-financial support. So we give financial and non-financial support in order to remove some of the barriers that are affecting women from having businesses that grow and thrive in our economy. Thanks, Nastasia.
Yeah. Ndoloza, I mean, when I was introducing you, I mean, mentioning that executive manager for enterprise development at SEDA, the other thing that the audience may not necessarily know, and I think it's important to also highlight, is that you've got 26 years of experience working in enterprise development, including developing, implementing, and monitoring SME development strategies. So what are you seeing on the ground? And is it also similar to some of the points Lucretia's pointed out?
Thanks, Nastasia. Good morning, everyone. Yes, I think Lucretia has touched on some of the points, but also I think factors that affect women, legal issues and other societal issues that are not necessarily business specific, naturally, they affect women's ability to start and grow and sustain their businesses. There is a study that we did with the Department of Small Business Development in 2020, focusing specifically on the needs, challenges, and opportunities for women. And one of the things that came out of the study was that funding remains one of the biggest problems, but it's also not because there's no funding. One of the reasons funding remains a challenge for women is because of their marital contracts. So it becomes difficult for them to go and raise capital because they need permission from their husbands due to the nature of their marital contracts. The second one is lack of support. As Lucretia has indicated, they have extra responsibilities at home. We saw that during COVID, there was a pulse survey on the impact of COVID on businesses generally. But when it came to women, it became very clear that they had additional challenges because, working from home, having to look after children, having to look after the household, let alone having to try and sustain your business during COVID over and above everything else that you normally don't have to take care of before COVID. That resulted in women's own businesses being affected more than other businesses generally. So even lack of support from family when women start their businesses, especially as you move further from the cities and towns and you get to rural areas, that's where women tend to be mostly affected. But we also know that those are the women that play a very big role in sustaining their families, because quite often husbands are away from home, working in bigger cities, and women get left behind to look after their families. But at the same time, women that tend to be, more proactive in starting entrepreneurial activities to sustain their children, they come across a lot of barriers. The other one is really something that has been talked about a lot in South Africa: the red tape, I think high barriers to starting businesses, high compliance requirements. That's another important factor that remains a hindrance for women in starting their businesses. And then the general things that Lucretia has mentioned, lack of financial, management skills. And I think to a very large extent, BDS is getting better, but BDS has been too generic sometimes and not sector specific. And maybe I even dare say that before COVID, it was also not always focus on the different life cycle stages of the business. And if you do that, you then tend to miss some of the pertinent requirements of the businesses at different stages of development. And of course, the last one also, access to procurement opportunities and markets in general. Men are more of go-getters. They have bigger networks. They know how to lobby for tenders and for procurement opportunities. And women, tend to be on a back foot when it's come to that. Thanks, Anastasia.
Right. Zandile, Ntokozo mentioning some really key aspects there and tying it in quite nicely with some of the points that Lucretia brought forward. But what was also quite interesting is that there were aspects that you brought in there that one doesn't really think about. I mean, we hear about the funding issues, we hear about the red tape, but there are also other sort of nuances that happen in the background that we don't take into consideration. As she mentioned, the marital status. What are some of the aspects you're seeing since you've been involved in the industry? And obviously, I suppose, since your involvement in Accenture's enterprise and supplier development program?
Thank you so much, Natasha, for that. I want to say good morning to everybody, and what an honor to be among such powerful women that are not only inclusion for women in our own spaces, right? So thank you so much for that. I mean, Sis Ntokozo, Sis Lucretia has spoken a lot about, what's the plight, what we know that's like it's out in the light, the opportunities.
We just seem to be having,
which we speak about that, women don't have a bigger network, and we know what that is. You can't have too many friends. You can't be going out golfing every day because you've got a family that you need to take care of. Right. So
Zandile, I do notice that your video is freezing a little bit, so we're going to try and fix that in the background. So perhaps do continue, and then we'll see how we can assist in terms of getting that video. But we are hearing some of the points you're mentioning. Okay, we'll try and get Zandile sorted on that end, but we're just going to keep the conversation going. So, Lucretia, I mean, Ntokozo mentioned something which is quite interesting. I mean, it's not interesting in that particular sense, but we are still in a pandemic, so to speak, and COVID had a significant impact on various businesses. And as it is, women were already, working on the back foot. There were various other challenges, and you can imagine the moment COVID hit, the challenges were now exacerbated. Are we starting to see a recovery somewhat, or where are we, especially when we try to imagine a post-pandemic phase for female-owned businesses, especially taking into consideration that some were at different stages of development?
I think Ntokozo mentioned a very important aspect to supporting businesses in general, but also women-owned businesses. It's so important to always consider the context. So we spoke a lot about the COVID era, and the COVID era had specific impact on specific industries, right? So right at the beginning, everybody was on lockdown, and pretty much every sector, at least for the first 3 months, was impacted. After 2 months of COVID, we all woke up and realized we've got to get back, because we all thought that COVID, the lockdown was only going to last, I think they said a month or 2 months. So we woke up 2 months later to a realization that we're still there. And luckily, some very important decisions were made by our government. So the manufacturing sector was able to go back to work. The mining sector was able to go back to work. Luckily, the agricultural sector and agro-processing were already as important sectors in the food security were already there, and the retail sector were there. But other sectors like tourism have suffered, and a lot of women own businesses in the tourism sector. So you can imagine for the last 24 months, pretty much, those sectors have suffered. We've seen what's happened in the airline industry. So those are some of the businesses that support, you'll see like in the airports, the businesses that support the airline industry. They've suffered. If you go to most of our airports, you'll see that they've closed down. Or if you go to some of our malls, you'll see that a lot of shops have closed down. So those are women-owned businesses that we're seeing having suffered. And as I said, the hospitality and tourism sector, they're still suffering till today because we're not seeing quite as many people going back into the tourism and traveling and so forth. It hasn't recovered quite at a fast pace as we had envisioned it to be. So those are some of the things that we have been experiencing, and that is the support that we're trying to provide to businesses, going forward, the retail sector, the hospitality sector, and we're also then now encouraging women, and really we want women to go into what we call the hard sectors of the economy, the mining sector, the infrastructure sector, the construction sector. These are some of the sectors that have been resilient even during the COVID, the hard 2 years of COVID. We're not out of the woods yet, but we are encouraging women to also play a role in those sectors that are able to sustain themselves, sometimes even beyond the difficulties. Thank you.
Zandile, great to have you back with us. I think you missed that, but so the conversation we were having with Lucretia was trying to understand where we were in terms of the lay of the land, given the fact that COVID had such a significant impact on various businesses, but also female-owned businesses. And I wonder if we can tie in that aspect with some of the aspects you're seeing on the ground, just so that as we progress into that conversation, the audience is with us. But let's try and see if we can put those two scenarios together. What are you seeing?
Great. Just to pick up, it's that, also technology, the ICT sector is one of those sectors that have not only been resilient, but also flourish, right? And that's where we've put our focus in supporting women-owned businesses in the ICT sector. But, what I wanted to say earlier on, before we were interrupted by technology, is that part of what we also need to do and understand is like, kind of looking back. We all know that for women, for women-owned businesses that are within the formal sector, right? So now we're talking about the hard sectors that Lucretia was talking about. Most of those owners of those small businesses, whether female or male, normally exit at management level or executive level, right? Or specialist level, right? So they've gone and worked up in corporate or government within their career, and at a certain level, management, senior management, executive management, they exit to start their business. And because we know there's also gender parity within the workplace, right, outside the business owners, that does contribute to the fact that we are now saying women-owned businesses are not earning less than 40% versus their male counterparts, right? So those things from the workplace, they do contribute to where now we land in the space of women-owned businesses, having that huge gap in terms of getting opportunities and being rewarded for their opportunities versus their male counterparts. So I would say we need to look at it holistically, the social, the impact, and then the journey a typical woman will take to where they land. It's also known that more women-owned businesses are in the informal sector, right, where there's low barriers to entry. And those women are not counted when we count the stats, right? Because we normally count the formal formalized businesses that are owned by women or male, right? So we also need to maybe to say, how do we bring the informal businesses, which are mostly owned by women, into the formal sector, right? And count them as contributors to our economy. But what I've seen that in the land is that women are definitely more resilient. Women have been making, like, I always say, we were raised in an era where our mothers were entrepreneurs, right? From selling fat cakes on the side of the road, from selling old clothes, secondhand clothing, from having spaza shops, from selling a container at entrepreneurs were raised by women, that somewhere along the line, there was a break in transmission where we did not regard those businesses as contributors to the economy, which I think for me, the biggest thing right now is that how do we change that narrative and start seeing those businesses as huge contributors to our economy?
Douglas, I want to come back to you here. I mean, you raised some very interesting points, and I saw, Zandile and Lucretia doing the same as well. How is the IDC thinking about some of the issues and barriers that we've touched on here quite in-depthly in terms of how they affect women? But how has the IDC as an organization thought about some of these issues, and what are some of the call it sort of priorities and solutions that have been in place to try and at least help and alleviate some of the pressures?
You said Ntokozo and then you said the IDC. Do you want Lucretia or Ntokozo?
My mistake. Let's go with Ntokozo, please.
Okay, I think Natasha, I'm a bit confused because the question is about the IDC.
No, my mistake. Let's work with what in terms of Accenture, in terms of what you're doing in dealing with some of the issues, and how you've been thinking about some of the mechanisms there, because we can talk about the barriers to entry, but and the other obstacles that have been highlighted, but what is your organization doing to alleviate some of that?
Okay, thank you very much. I think I will start by maybe talking about what government is doing generally, because I'm coming from a government entity. I think with all the challenges that came with COVID, one of the good things that happened during COVID, I think, was the spotlight on township based businesses, the informal sector. Zandile has touched on the need to bring the informal sector into, the mainstream economy, because it's a very vibrant sector, but it's often unaccounted for. So, and I know when COVID happened, the Department of Small Business Development, has started, to figure out how do we bring the informal sector into the mainstream economy. And I know in trying to do that, they had engagements with Brazil in particular. We know how big the informal sector is in Brazil, but somehow they've managed to find a way to bring it into the mainstream, to formalize it so that it's accounted for properly in the economy. So with the onset of COVID, most government departments had to come up with mechanisms for sustaining and supporting the informal sector so that it could survive, because especially during the first lockdown, level 5 lockdown, where everything was closed, it was very important to keep the informal sector, the plaza shops and what have you, in the townships open and operating, because that was an opportunity for them to make business, and they were readily available for those immediate needs. So firstly, as part of the COVID relief support program, and then as part of the economic recovery plan, it became the support to township and rural businesses became one of the focal points of the Department of Small Business Development, and we are implementing that program on behalf of the department. But the point I want to get to, which we all raised earlier, was, the lack of access to training, to information, business compliance. That has changed quite a lot. And I'm saying that because as SEDA, we are implementing those programs on behalf of the small business development, where there's actually a program called Township and Rural Enterprise program, which we're implementing for the Department of Small Business Development, which looks at compliance, training, information, and our sister agency, the Small Enterprise Finance Agency, then deals with the finance part of it. So that's one of the things that we have done. The second thing that I also want to highlight, which also both Lucretia and Zandile touch on, is supporting women to participate in non-traditional sectors, because the irony of COVID is, in as much as a lot of businesses were negatively affected and had to close down some of them, some businesses actually grew because it was more about adapting to COVID. It was more about, being able to identify other opportunities, being able to change your business model. There are businesses that used to sell fresh flowers and had to close, but then they diverted to providing corporates with, I'm not sure if artificial flowers, because they don't really look artificial as we used to know them. Those artificial flowers, but that look very natural in a proper vase. It looks like there's water inside. So they diversified to more of internal, I wouldn't say designing, but internal decoration of some sort. And they realized that, I'm actually making more money here. Even my overheads are lower. My risks are also lower. So, and there is also, because I think the point I wanted to get to is that in trying to solve women business issues, we can't deal with one aspect without the other. So some of the issues need the likes of the Gender Commission, and we've had an opportunity to be, to participate in one of their panels, and we shared the same, studies that we've done, because some of the things, they need intervention at that level. If you look at the legal and contractual issues. Yeah, I'm going to stop there.
We'll expand on some of the points you mentioned, because I do see we have questions also coming through from the audience, which is great. So do keep those questions coming, and then we'll answer them towards the end of the panel. Lucretia, automatically when one thinks of your organization, they tie funding to it. And I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about your organization's mandate and what you're looking for from a funding point of view, but also, is funding the only thing that you offer? What else can women-led businesses, entrepreneurs approach you for?
Thank you very much, Anastasia. And I think I'll start with your last question, and then I can go into the funding. So at the IDC, we focus on more than just funding, right? So I spoke earlier about providing non-financial support as well as financial support. So on the non-financial side, we do help businesses who are still putting together their business plans. We do assist them to put those business plans together and also to understand the legislative framework that their businesses are going to operate in, and to also then prepare their businesses for funding. So that's something we do. And of course, once we've funded them, we provide what we call, post-investment support, and we then provide business support even post-funding businesses, particularly the smaller ones. And that post-investment support can range depending on the type of business. It can be financial, can be management support, it can be governance. So it's a range of different support that we provide. But coming back to the funding, as I said, since 2015, 2016, we have been driving ourselves to be funding more women, SMEs in particular, and we've managed to really play a significant role over the period. The funding that we've approved in that period, at least 20% of it has gone to women-owned businesses. Our primary mandate is to fund businesses that are creating industrial capacity in the country. And I mentioned earlier on, some of the sectors that we focus on is mining and metals, infrastructure, things like water, electricity, roads, agriculture and agro-processing, manufacturing, chemicals. During the COVID period, we did a lot of pharmaceutical type businesses that we were financing. And of course, we spoke about hospitality, and Zandile, we do also focus a lot on ICT, and we're still seeing it more of an infrastructure play, but a lot of it is beyond infrastructure. So that's also something that we focus on. We assist people that want to buy into businesses, people that want to build businesses, and also people that want to grow businesses. And our funding instrument range from debt all the way to equity, depending on what the business needs. And where we're dealing with women-owned businesses, we do provide extra support, and sometimes we're able to remove some of the barriers that come with starting a new business, particularly when the entrepreneur doesn't have their own funds. We find ways in which we can support them. So those are the things that we do, and we are really, really, really driving women-owned businesses and youth-owned businesses. This being Youth Month, those two, sometimes you get a woman youth, which is an even added plus, because we all know how important it is for us to support both our women as well as our youth. Thank you, Nastasia.
Zandile, let's come to you here, because I'm sure you've seen a whole host of businesses, whether it's also women-owned businesses. Are there sort of, I want to call them the key pillars, but are there boxes that they tick that when we discuss them, we can all learn from each other and think, well, there's this aspect of my business that I haven't thought about, or there's this aspect that I should be strengthening and in order for my business to be sustainable. What should we be thinking about, especially as you go through the checklist of whether your business has what it takes to be sustainable, or you can sort of fix certain issues that are happening?
Awesome. I think being a woman is a plus. It's not the forefront, right? When you're women-owned businesses. And the most important thing is your business providing value to your prospective client or customer. So I think, women, sometimes I've seen that they lead with being a woman, but being a woman is an added advantage, but not the core of your business. So let's have our value proposition clear, number one. Number two, I feel that, as women, we also need to kind of talk to each other and engage with each other and procure from each other, right? I'm very passionate about the fact that we need women not only to be buyers, but creators of the solutions, because we are the biggest buyers of products, right, in the marketplace. So when you look at your FMCG products and so forth, so we know what we need and what we want and how that product needs to work to suit us. And therefore, that's why there's always this thing of we deserve a seat at the table. But it's not only a seat, but it's also part of we want to contribute in how things that contribute to our livelihood are created. And I'll make an example. You know, when in the luxury car where you could open a boot now using your car key. So that's the first technology that came in. But then the next technology was that contactless opening of your boot, right? And that contactless opening of the boot was a technology created by women, because she would come back from shopping with a kid and a stroller and have to open this boot. And because of fear of somebody can come and take, and she want to put the stuff down, she's like, wouldn't it be great if I could open this boot without having to open my bag, get the key out to open the boot, or drop everything that I'm carrying? And, you know, that's one of those true ways of, because we are using these products and we are the biggest users and buyers of this product, we therefore are better placed to provide the solutions, right? So I like the fact that we always have to encourage women to come in. But also from this side of the table, what I'm saying is that we need to also create a conducive environment for women to flourish and thrive, right? And when we talk about women-owned businesses, we're talking about our procurement colleagues, right? As much as we're looking at women-owned, but we need to look at procurement colleagues. If there's always a male that's sitting across the table from a woman who's coming to pitch their business, that is a barrier. Right. So we need to speak to our procurement colleagues who needs to understand that engaging with the woman is different because we are different, right? And open up the landscape and be more open to welcome women in and provide them with opportunities, not because they're women, but because they've got value and they provide value to your products that will serve the market that buys those products. And that market is women. Right. So I want to just like to end there, but also just to add to the support that we provide for women businesses. You know, it's important that it's not a blanket approach, right? Every business is unique, whether it's owned by a woman or male. So I would just also like to encourage us who are in this space of supporting businesses to say, let's stop doing the blanket approach. Let's treat every business individually and provide an individualized support to each business, because that way we'll be able to increase the impact, and in that way we'll be able to increase scale, right? And stop this, like, you know, spray and pray approach and hope that something's going to come, because we're wasting our time and wasting these businesses' time to grow and contribute to our economy.
Doris, I want to come to you with this question because it actually was prompted by what Zandile just mentioned. And when we're done, we'll move to and get Lucretia's take. So we've spoken a lot about, Zandile brought in aspects about engaging with women and what the procurement side can do. Would it be helpful for female-owned businesses to, so say for instance, you applied to supply certain aspects, or you applied for funding, or whatever the mechanism is that you were trying to get, and you didn't quite either get the funding or you didn't get the contract to supply? Would it be helpful for that particular company or organization to sit you down and tell you what was wrong with your funding proposal, or what was wrong with the way in which you approached our procurement, your request, so to speak? Does it help women fine-tune and chisel certain aspects that are not working, as opposed to constantly pitching with the wrong things all the time? Would that be a useful way to assist women?
No, definitely. And I don't know if you've heard that there is a coming measure of SEDA and CIFA because we both fall under one department, and one does finance, one does BDS. One of the main reasons for that is also to improve the quality and streamline our services, just to make sure that a person, to improve the communication between us and SEFA, so that even if someone is declined due to maybe the proposal not having pitched the business correctly, that person is not simply rejected or declined, but is rather referred to SEDA for BDS, and then go back to SEFA again to apply for funding. We've also started working together with SEFA in doing the post-investment support, which Lucretia also mentioned that the IDC is doing. We're also doing that for SEFA to make sure that those that manage to get funding do perform and are able to repay their loans. But one of the programs that we've found to work very well is our mentorship and coaching program for women, because what happens, we get them to work under a mentor or a coach to assist them to work on their businesses. You kind of step back a bit out and look at your business from outside, and you decide for yourself and get to see, with the assistance of the coach, where is my business lacking? And for me to get where I want to be with this business, these are the steps that I need to take. And they do that also in a group format. So that gives them an opportunity to work on their business. And it's a very rewarding program, because on at the end of, it's a 10 months program, and it's 10 months because the aim is to see change in this business at the end of the program. But it also allows them to learn from one another as participants. It also allows them to establish networks and actually find markets internally amongst themselves. But to answer your question directly, it's always very important to go back to the drawing board and check where is it that I need to improve, and so that whether you go and pitch back to the same company or you go elsewhere, you don't repeat the same mistakes.
Lucretia, your thoughts?
I think Dogoza has put it so well. It's very important to have those discussions. Also, for us to create more networking opportunities for women. It's so important to learn from others and to be open to learning from others. And sometimes when we make mistakes, we feel bad about it. So you pitched for something, for work, and you didn't get it. That's generally not the end of the road. From our side, we're always willing to have a conversation about why you were not successful. In fact, even from our procurement side, if you applied, for a procurement opportunity at the IDC, our procurement team is always available to have a debrief with you to say, your pitch didn't succeed because you didn't have this strength or that strength and so forth. And then you can then go and close that gap. So that when you pitch next time, either with us or somebody else, you've closed that gap. So I think it's something that we really need to focus on and hone in on it for growth, and also just talk to entrepreneurs that it's okay to not succeed the first time, maybe not even the second time. Eventually you'll succeed if you just keep at it, but you must learn from the mistakes that you're making along the way. Thanks, Nastasia.
Yeah, so we've got quite a few questions that have come through. So what I want to do now is open up the floor for those questions, and then perhaps some of the responses that they get from you ladies will prompt others to ask more questions. There's probably a burning issue sitting at the back of someone's mind. And the first question, I'm going to direct this one to you, Zandile. It says it's in relation to access to markets. So The question reads, how do we penetrate the market? How do we become part of ESD programs?
Great. So from an Accenture perspective, I'll start there and I'll give you an overview. Our program is focused at ICT businesses, so businesses that operate within the ICT sector, and Black women businesses, QSEs, we'll look at less than 20 million, right? When you choose, I think the important thing besides Accenture's program is, and we'll add the link to you can read up about our program to the website. But I think the most important thing is that when you decide how to decide on an ESD program, right? And I think this is where most entrepreneurs are not capitalizing on the opportunities that have been created by government to enable an ecosystem where entrepreneurs can thrive. So the first thing I always say, seek a company that you align in your services, right? So this company can either be a company that you aspire to be, right? Or a future competitor, or a prospective client or supplier, right? They've got a need why they should help you, right? If it's a prospective client, you can supply to them. It makes sense for them to develop you and grow you, right? So look at that. Number two, when you go there, understand what is it that you're providing to that organization and what is your ask from them. Be clear and articulate your ask. And then fourthly, always end up, what is the end goal? The end goal should always be for procurement opportunities. So work your way back. What kind of contract do I want from this organization? I want to supply them with eggs, right? Therefore, what would it take for me? What are the requirements? How should the eggs be? At what temperatures? At what grade? And so forth. And then they help you in that journey, and then that becomes your development program, right? And that's how specific it should be, right? So for me, I think that's more important. And then in terms of procurement opportunities, right? I believe that, again, the government has enabled us to have a thriving environment where SMEs can go to corporates for opportunities. There's that 30% subcontracting rule within the public sector, for example. But my thing is that network. If you're looking at egg company, the egg company, know who's in procurement, build relationships, follow them on LinkedIn, send your communication. You need to, as a business person, you need to take yourself out of your comfort zone, and you need to sell your value proposition.
I couldn't have put it better myself. Some valuable insights there, Zandile. Thank you. Ndozo and Lucretia. So this one, I'll try and split it between the two of you, because perhaps you've thought of some of these, this particular issue. The question says, what are your recommendations for women entrepreneurs to cross gender and racial disparities or differences simultaneously? And I'm sure you've thought about this, especially with some of the businesses you interact with and some of the issues maybe they bring forward. What are your recommendations? Let's start off with you, Ndogozo. How do we bridge that gap?
I think the gender one is it's an easier one for me to handle, because I do believe that there is quite a lot of work that is being done currently for gender mainstreaming, and each sector department has to focus on specific programs for women. One of the big drives currently from government's side is getting facilitating participation of women in government procurement, and is starting with focusing on products that are needed by women. So there is a big drive currently from presidency for involving women in the procurement of sanitary towels, especially for schools, where the department procures sanitary towels for school. But if I were to just answer the question broadly, is really having specific interventions for women, as we all said earlier, that there are specific challenges pertaining to women. So we first need to understand what the challenges are so that we come with interventions that are very specific in addressing those challenges. One that we spoke about that relates to access to finance, skills, networking opportunities. That's what our mentorship and coaching program is attempting to do at a business level by holding someone's hand and working with her through her business, not for her, and then giving her a document that she has no clue where to start with implementing, but working with this person through her business. The other very important intervention that I forgot to mention, that is attempting to involve women in, global value chains and participation in international markets. It's our She Trades program, which we're also implementing as SEDA on behalf of the Department of Small Business Development. It's an international partnership focusing specifically on women that are at that level, that are ready to get involved in international expansion or want to explore international markets. So we started with, creating awareness. We now have about 2,700 that are registered. We're now profiling them and we'll be implementing intervention. But on the race issue, the important tool, I'm aware I'm out of time. I want to go back to what Zandile mentioned. There are so many important instruments that the government has put in place. And the most important one is the ESD one, because it's linked to companies' BEE scorecard. And private companies that want to be good corporates in South Africa, that want to do business with government, they have to be involved in ESD. And for me, that's the one most important tool for, breaking racial barriers. But it starts with an entrepreneur. What problem are you solving with what you are offering?
Great. So we've got about 8 minutes left. Lucretia, let's get your thoughts. And if I can, for the interest of time, I want to squeeze in a second question that's actually directed to you. And the question says, how long does it take to approve a deal for funding at the IDC? So hopefully you can tackle both those questions.
I think the first question about barriers has been well answered by both Zandile and Ntokozo. Actually, really, it's about the entrepreneur understanding what problem they are solving. And I always say one of the key aspects of trying to penetrate barriers, both race and gender, is knowing your business well, having the technical expertise or having the hunger to ask questions. Most people in society, if you ask them questions and you are hungry for knowledge, will be willing to give you that knowledge. So just penetrating, going to seminars, in a lot of the sectors, mining, infrastructure, there are lots and lots of groupings that discuss issues in those sectors. Go there. If you want to be an egg-laying person, go to the agricultural discussions and be part of them, ask questions, make friends. That's how you penetrate the different barriers. By just being curious. And it does actually feed into your second question. How long does it take? How long is a piece of string? It really depends. So if your business case has been, well articulated, you have access to markets, and there's a good understanding of how it's all going to fit together. Remember, it's the different elements, who's going to manage it, and etc. It can take up to 6 weeks. But if all of those things are not in place and we have to assist you to get them in place, you don't have the environmental stuff, you don't have the financials, etc. We'll work with you. You don't have maybe forecasts or a good understanding of the market that you're going into. it'll take a little bit longer. So it really depends on how well articulated that business is in order for us to then be able to provide the support and the funding for that business. Thanks.
Right. Zandile, I can imagine outside of, the audience who are probably made up of female entrepreneurs, we probably do have corporates as well, or member of somebody sitting from corporate. Looking at what has been discussed, I mean, what should corporates be thinking about, given the fact that you guys as Accenture, you've had plenty of time and experience and runway to think about the ways to assist entrepreneurs, but what should corporates be doing internally if they thinking we want to create mentorship programs, we want to be able to assist where we can? What can they do?
Great. So I'll just give a few pointers. Number one, your supplier inclusion strategy needs to tie into your business strategy. Those two needs to talk. As Dogozo said, if you're going to be a good corporate citizen in South Africa, your transformation strategy needs to be clear and articulated. That ties into your BEE. Secondly, you need to look at your procurement and you need to make a conscious decision. What procurement categories, services, product offerings are you going to say, I'm setting aside these for small businesses, women-owned businesses? And based on that, what do they need to have? What do these businesses need to have to enable me to still deliver quality to my own clients whilst partnering with SMEs to procure those opportunities? So I think that from corporates, it has to be intentional and it has to be a strategy. Also, your policies and processes. One of the things that we do is that we ensure that we pay our SMEs that are part of our program within 10 days of invoice. We don't supply, we don't provide financial support, but through us paying our invoices within 10 days of that invoice enables us to turn around that SME's company and provide them cash flow. So those are the things that you can change your policies to enable your policies within your organization to be conducive to interact with SMEs.
All right, we've got about 3 minutes. Ndogo, a quick one here. One of the viewers wanting to know, how do we apply for the SEDA mentorship program? Is there a website they can go to?
They can go to their nearest SEDA branch because those are our service points. You register as a client so that they have the full profile of your business and they are able to see at which stage you are, and then that's how you get involved in the program. Thank you.
Lucretia, we've discussed many things, and I'm sure we could add another 15-20 minutes of other topics that affect the entrepreneurship ecosystem. If a viewer who's going to watch this, probably as the playback facility, can take one key point away from all the stuff that we have unpacked here, what would be that one thing for you that someone can take away?
Really, the one thing is that our country is ripe and there is support for your business. You just need to really think about what services do you want to provide? Do you have the skills for it? The knowledge, the financing, it is all there. Our government has provided for it. Our banks have provided for it, and as well as the DFIs ourselves have provided for it. So there's no reason why somebody who wants to start a business is unable to do that. So that would be my key takeaway to any reader or listener that is listening to us this morning. Money is available, just solve a problem, find a problem to solve. Money is not really the key issue.
That is a beautiful way of putting it and wrapping it up for us. Solve a problem, and I guess the rest of it will follow from there. And network as much as you can, which is one of my key takeaway, and ask for assistance where it can be offered. And of course, thank you so much to the viewers for sending in those questions. Hope we have answered everything for you. If there's any aspect of this webinar that you have missed, remember, we are going to be emailing it back to you in our thank you mailer. So do keep an eye out for it and you can play it back. Thank you so much to the wonderful ladies and the valuable insights. Ndogozo Majola, they are approaching us from SEDA. Zandile, who is from Accenture, she's the Supplier Inclusion and Diversity Lead. And of course, you heard the voice of Lucretia Kumalo, who is a Divisional Executive for Client Support and Growth at the IDC. Thank you so much to our sponsors, Accenture, SEDA, and IDC. And until next time, goodbye.
Okay.